Welcome to a Lotus comparison I've been wanting to do for quite some time. We're currently sitting in a 2021 Lotus Evora GT with a 6-speed manual transmission, and we'll be comparing this against the brand new 2024 Lotus Emira Sport, also with a 6-speed manual. The Evora GT was discontinued after the 2021 model year, and prices have still hovered in the $85,000 to $100,000 range, depending on mileage and condition. A brand new Emira is right around $105,000. So the question is the Emira actually an improvement over the Evora GT in terms of driving dynamics? The Emira obviously has a much nicer interior, but sitting in this 2021 GT right now, it's not a bad place to be. Does it feel like a $100,000 interior? Maybe not, but we still get some nice stitched Alcantara, leather and Alcantara steering wheel. Driver controls are all pretty nice, very nice shifter. I love how this steering wheel is just the right size, and the thickness of the rim just fits my hands perfectly. Some of the switchgear does feel a bit cheap. Now the Emira interior is a pretty big step forward, as we'll see very soon, but let's start with the specs of this Evora GT. It's powered by a 3.5 liter supercharged 2GR Toyota V6, pushing out 416 horsepower, 332 pound-feet of torque. That's 16 horsepower and 22 foot-pounds up on that Emira. Both cars weigh around 3,200 pounds. They have double wishbone suspension at all four corners, hydraulic power steering, and they're just a recipe for driving engagement. I drove this exact Evora GT at Sonoma Raceway a few years ago and had a blast, although second gear corners, lift-off, oversteer was definitely something I had to watch out for. Push button start. Now we're gonna put this into sport mode and open up the valved exhaust. One thing I really didn't like about the Evora GT, all three examples that I've driven actually, very touchy throttle response. Touchy and inconsistent. Let's see if I've actually gotten used to that after driving so many examples now. This Toyota V6 makes a great sound. Listen to this. It's not a particularly high-pitched sound, but it still sounds really cool for a V6 in my opinion. The power delivery is smooth, it builds progressively to the 7,000 RPM red line. But the first thing you notice when you drive this car is the steering feel. It is tremendous. There's so much feedback about the road surface. Granted, we're driving on a very, very smooth road, barely any bumps at all, but the way this steering just loads up, it's just beautiful. And again, the size of this steering wheel is perfect. Now the brake feel is not what you'd expect if you're used to driving a Porsche. The first couple inches of travel into that pedal, you might be taken aback by how little stopping force there is. But the deeper you get into the pedal, that's when you realize how easy these brakes are to control. Oh, there's that weird throttle response. See right there, I under-blipped it. The earlier corner, I over-blipped it. Just not consistent. What a sound. The 6-speed manual also feels excellent. These cars are known for having some quality control issues where you might drive one example and it feels like a 9 out of 10 shifter. Then you drive another and it feels like a 5 out of 10. Thankfully, this is the former. Very aggressive exhaust note with the valve open. Oh yeah, the shifter is just so mechanical. Very positive engagement into each gate. I love that. You can just feel the mid-engine balance of this car. The front talks to you so much. It doesn't have that razor-edged feeling like a Porsche RS product. This car is more about the communication, more so than the raw numbers and the sheer amount of grip. I remember driving this at Sonoma. It's very easy to trail brake this car. It responds so well to your inputs. Well, not so much the throttle, but the brakes and steering you can really use to rotate this car. Now Now we're on Cup 2 tires, an OEM size, 245 up front, 295 rear. Same as that Emira. So this is about as close to an apples to apples comparison as you can get. Both cars have stock suspension. All I can say right now is that I am thoroughly enjoying the Evora GT. Such a raw and engaging car to drive, but not overly raw. This is absolutely not an Elise or an Exige. This is a lot more forgiving and comfortable to drive. Even the footwell has more space than the prior model years of Evora, so your feet aren't all the way pointed to the right. Even though this has an aluminum tub with very wide sills, still relatively easy to get in and out of. The Emira supposedly makes it even easier and has even more space for your feet. Let's find out if that's the case. The suspension compliance is really spot on for a road car. It's not overly harsh. And I remember comparing this against a 718 Cayman GT4 not too long ago, and I found this to be the better suspension for the road, for a bumpy road. Lots of compliance, but also giving you plenty of control in the corners. Oh yeah, brake feel is so good once you get into the pedal. Throttle response to behave the way I want. Now, I know I can take it out of sport mode, but then the red line becomes a little bit lower, I think. Gearing is fine, maybe 5% too long in my opinion. I think second goes to well over 70 miles an hour. As I over blip there. Ugh, so annoying. Let me try taking it out of sport. See what that does. That closes the valved exhaust as well. Engine still sounds great. Yep, there's that low red line. So you really need it in sport. You can really get into a flow driving this car, minus that throttle response. It is, for me, a deal breaker. I love this car in every other way, but I'm a sucker for excellent throttle response, and this car just doesn't have it. I sort of got it right there. This engine, I wish it had more revs to work with. Like right when it's getting good in terms of the sound and the power delivery, the fun is over. It feels like an almost artificially low red line. I think these engines do need some internal upgrades to be able to rev to say 7,500 or above. So that's unfortunate. A simple tune won't get you there, reliably at least. But in every other way, this car is just phenomenal. I love the steering feel. This is about as close to perfect steering as I've ever tried. It's up there with a McLaren 675 LT and 750S. Hydraulic power steering, there's nothing quite like it. All right, with that being said, time to hop into the Emira and see if it actually is an improvement and whether you should spend the additional, call it $15,000 to $20,000. All right, guys, we're now in the 2024 Lotus Emira Sport. The specs on this car are so close to that of the Evora GT. We're powered by the same 2GR engine, but it's detuned a little bit to make 400 horsepower and 310 pound-feet. The critical difference in the engine, though, is 6,800 RPM redline. That doesn't matter whether you're in Tour, Sport, or Track. 6,800 is the maximum you can rev this engine to. We still have hydraulic power steering, the same 6-speed manual transmission, same aluminum chassis with front and rear double wishbone suspension, This car also weighs around 3,200 pounds. From a performance standpoint, these cars should be virtually the same tire size even. Now, first impressions on the interior, this is definitely a big step up in terms of quality and design. We finally have a proper infotainment display. It's very high resolution. The gauges are now digital as well. Love the white leather seats and the white leather dash and doors. Much nicer place to be. And there's even a little bit more space in the footwell for your left leg. Now, that being said, these seats are a downgrade in terms of support. I can already tell without even driving the car, less lateral support for my back and my thighs. Also, the steering wheel, I don't know why manufacturers have to do these funky squared off steering wheels. The C8 Corvette is even more guilty of this, but this one, a little bit rounded off, and it just doesn't quite feel right, especially because the 9 and 3 grips here behind the steering wheel, they bulge out. And so I can't quite get my perfect hand position because I like to curl my fingers around that steering wheel. Now, the owner Rowan did do a couple of mods to this. We have a lithium battery, a third cat delete with a Miltech valve controller, Castrol SRF brake fluid, stock pads, stock tires. These are worn out Cup 2s, but Evora GT has the same thing. Controversial start-stop button with a red cover, like a fighter jet. Personally, I think it's totally fine. We'll put this thing into sport mode, and then we'll make sure the valved exhaust is open. Turning radius is actually not bad. Oh yeah, this engine sounds even better with the third cat delete and Miltech valve controller. The big question I have though, is the throttle response fixed here? Let's find out. Look at that. Nailed it on the very first try. Let's try a 4-to-3 downshift. Oh yes. Super precise and easy to nail that rev match. Absolutely love it. Such a night and day difference from the Evora. Now the shifter feels, I would say, about the same, if not maybe slightly better than the Evora's shifter. Very nice and mechanical, but this one feels maybe just that 5% tighter. Now here's one thing I'm noticing. The steering, although still excellent, is a slight bit more numb. Maybe because it's a little bit lighter. I can't quite put my finger on it yet, but there's also definitely a bit less feedback coming through the wheel. Maybe part of it is the steering wheel itself. This thicker rimmed wheel might be muting some of that information. We're on the same tires. Oh yeah, there's way more initial brake bite here also. It's still very easy to modulate, but the first couple of inches of pedal travel actually do something with this car. Oh yeah, this engine sounds really nice. I just wish it revved higher. I wish it revved to 7,500. Fun fact, this engine makes peak power at 6,800, which is its red line. Yeah, overall, this car is definitely just a bit more numb. It's all relative, right? You hop from any modern Porsche non-GT car, or hell, even a GT3 probably, into this, and you'd probably think this car is super, super raw. But compared to that Evora GT, a little bit more disconnected. Just that 5 to 10%, especially the steering. But thankfully the throttle response here, I'm happy to report, is fixed. While not the best, it's still not as good as a GT4 or GT3, it's no longer intrusive. Let's try dialing this into track mode now and see what kind of a difference that makes. Oh, I really like that 1 to 2 shift. Oh yeah, the steering doesn't load up as much with this car. It remains light, even in the corners. Oh, the throttle response is still perfect here. It might be slightly sharper in track mode versus sport, but not a big difference. Really enjoying this transmission though. Lotus finally got it right, or at least this particular example. Feels excellent. Getting a little bit squirrely there under power. Love the brake feel. I think for track, no question, the Emira's initial bite would be superior. Either way though, both cars have excellent braking feel. Much less sensitive than the brake pedal in a Porsche GT or really any other modern sports car. But I can confirm this seat does not hold me in nearly as well as the Evora GT seat. And also I'm sitting an inch or two higher, it feels like. In the Evora GT, I felt really nice and snug in that seat. I wonder if you can swap in the Evora seat into this car. Now I'm wondering, is there a way to fix the Evora's throttle response? Maybe a throttle controller, a tune? If the Emira can get it right, there's no reason the Evora can't, right? Honestly, even though I prefer everything else about the driving dynamics in the Evora GT by that extra 5 to 10%, the throttle response of that car is so bad that I completely write it off as a potential car for myself. Whereas the Emira is something I would actually consider. So to summarize, the Evora GT, what does it have in terms of strengths over the Emira? The higher red line and slightly more power, better seats, slightly better steering, a better steering wheel for me at least, lower seating position. And in some ways, I like how aggressive it looks. The Emira is more classically beautiful, but the Evora GT has a much more menacing presence to it, and I kind of like that. Emira strengths, a much nicer interior with modern tech, maybe a slightly better shifter in terms of feel, and vastly better throttle response. So as you can see, neither car is perfect, but they both are just a joy to drive. Get into a groove with. I love the suspension. I forgot to mention that. Suspension feels about the same. But we're on, again, a very smooth, flowing road, so not a whole lot of chances to test the compliance over bumps. But both are very comfortable. They both have a bit of body roll, a bit of pitch, a bit of dive, but they communicate to the driver. That's what these cars are all about, the communication. It's a modern car with maybe not so modern driving dynamics, and that's a beautiful thing in 2024. All right, guys. Let me know what you think about this comparison. Which would you take? An Evora GT for, say, $85,000 to $90,000, or a brand new Emira for just over $100,000? For me, throttle response is key. And that's why I take the Emira, despite liking the Evora GT that little bit more in almost every other way. So a big shout out to Joe and to Rowan. Let me know what you think about this comparison down in the comments. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.